Item #, 5494. Level 1. Containment Class. Esoteric. Secondary Class. Ticonderoga. Disruption Class. Flum. Risk Class. Danger. Link to memo. An SCP-5494 instance observing a water intake station 220 meters below the surface of Lake Huron. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-5494 is contained by the cultural practices of the First Peoples of the Great Lakes. 1. Description. SCP-5494 is a population of chimerical life forms inhabiting the beds of Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie and Lake Superior in East Central North America. Origins are primarily feline. Most cataloged examples also feature some combination of piston scales, bovine horns, rodentine quills, avian feathers and a prehensile serpentine tail formed from pure copper. 3. Precise enumeration of the SCP-5494 population in the Great Lakes is impossible. Specimens are capable of blending seamlessly into their environments, disrupting both analog and digital recording apparatus, and altering weather patterns. Addendum 5494-1. Experiment logs. Covert Foundation shipping on Lake Huron during the construction of Provisional Site 43 in 1942 was plagued by storms and attacked on 19 separate occasions by anomalous entities. On the southeastern shore of the lake, the same entities frequently consumed workers at the Achromatic Abatement Section's new refineries for anomalous materials. Co-directors Drive B, L, Scout and Drive W, Ryderich were ordered by Overwatch Command to attempt capture or neutralization of SCP-5494. One mobile task force and one unit of D-Class personnel formerly assigned to excavation duty were reassigned for this purpose. Experiment 5494 Ray 01. Date 05/24/1942. Intent. Determine the dietary preferences of SCP-5494. Theory. SCP-5494 instances resemble mutated panthers, cougars or lynx. Dr. Ryderich suggested that their diet might therefore consist of both large and small prey animals from the surrounding environment, captured at the shoreline. Procedure. One wild deer was released into the lake near Provisional Site 43. Observations. An instance of SCP-5494 appeared, ignored the deer, and consumed the feeding team. Conclusions. SCP-5494 prefers hominid food sources. In light of RE 5494-01, a more nuanced approach was authorized, claiming that Dr. Ryderich's Achromatic abatement facilities were actually a new water purification plant for the nearby Department of Defense camp, the cover for the underground workings of Site 43. Foundation officials began consultation on native reservations in the region, particularly with the Anishinaabe. SCP-5494 was identified by elders in each nation as a class of Manitou known as Mishipshu, Mishpshu, or a variety of similar terms. Epithets in English include underwater panthers and great lynx. According to legend, these beings originate from Mississippi-Cotton Island in Lake Superior. 5 hold the copper deposits of the Great Lakes sacred, and possess anomalous powers to heal, enrich fish harvests, and manipulate water. Informants indicated that SCP-5494 is extremely dangerous, yet receptive to supplication. Experiment 5494 Ray 02. Date 05/30/1942. Intent. Capture SCP-5494. Theory. Ojibwe Anishinaabe elders explain that SCP-5494's connection to copper was discovered when a youth successfully defeated one specimen by battering it with a wooden paddle, breaking off a piece of the metal from its tail. Dr. Ryderick suggested that SCP-5494 may be vulnerable to blunt force trauma. Procedure. 3 members of MTF Gamma 43 were instructed to patrol the waters near Provisional Site 43 in a reinforced raft and capture an SCP-5494 instance. Agents were armed with automatic rifles and riot sticks. Observations. Gamma-43 engaged 2 instances of SCP-5494 in combat. All 3 agents were consumed. Conclusions. Combat with SCP-5494 is inadvisable. After the Acroamatic Abatement Section began using Lake Huron copper to construct its pipes in early July, citing the anomalous healing properties ascribed to SCP-5494 and its environment, attacks on Foundation Lakeside projects increased dramatically. Experiment 5494 Ray 03. Date, 06/09/1942. Intent, appease SCP-5494. Theory, Ojikri Anishinaabe elders describe the game wherein one child takes on the role of SCP-5494 and attempts to drag others into the water with them. Dr. Ryderick suggested that demonstrating an understanding of this cultural practice might please SCP-5494. Procedure. The game was attempted on the shoreline near Provisional Site 43 with D-Class personnel. Observations. 3 instances of SCP-5494 observed the game until all personnel had been pulled into the water, at which point they consumed them. Conclusions. SCP-5494 is resistant to appeasement. Construction on Acroamatic Abatement Facility Alpha was halted in mid-June 1942 when SCP-5494 demonstrated the ability to attack workers at inland job sites. This ability had been attested by multiple Anishinaabe sources over the preceding months. But as all sightings had heretofore taken place in marine environments, their testimony had been discarded as superstition. Experiment 5494 Ray 04. Date, 07/02/1942. Intent, negotiate with SCP-5494. Theory, Meskwaki elders conveyed a legend describing the eternal conflict between SCP-5494 and a second, unattested class of entity known as the Thunderbirds. 6. Dr. Ryderick suggested proposing an alliance against the Thunderbirds to the SCP-5494 population. Procedure. Dr. M. Barbeau, an anthropologist from the Archives and Revisions section of Provisional Site 43, recorded the legend in full without the permission or knowledge of the Meskwaki. He recited the legend to the lake, ending with a statement of solidarity with SCP-5494 and its conflict with the Thunderbirds. Observations. 4 SCP-5494 instances remained silent for the duration of the tale and subsequent statement. When these had concluded, they consumed all personnel present. Conclusions. SCP-5494 is resistant to negotiation. Subsequently, Dr. Scouch successfully petitioned O5 to directly involve Indigenous experts in the preparation of ritual materials for engagement with SCP-5494. Experiment 5494 Ray 05. Date, 07/21/1942. Intent, appease SCP-5494. Theory, Potawatomi Anishinaabe elders demonstrated the creation of a medicine bundle bound in snake skin, a traditional offering to SCP-5494. The elders presented their bundle to the lake without incident. Dr. Ryderick suggested repeating this ceremony with Foundation personnel. Procedure. A duplicate medicine bundle was created at Provisional Site 43 using materials previously seized by the Canadian Department of Indian Affairs. The 2 remaining MTF Gamma-43 agents presented the bundle to the lake, beseeching SCP-5494 to protect the Acroamatic Abatement facilities and grant healing powers to the copper used in their pipes. Observations. 5 instances of SCP-5494 consumed all personnel present, pointedly rejecting the medicine bundle. Conclusions. SCP-5494 single quote S resistance to appeasement is confirmed. Addendum 5494-2, Response Outline. Historical Review Group CLEO 4 had by this time identified 30 uncontained anomalies native to the Lake Huron region. when consultation with Indigenous informants revealed detailed knowledge of all 30. Dr. Scout took over management of SCP-5494 from Dr. Ryderick and petitioned O5 to classify the affected reservations as a Nexus.7. Huron.png. Lake Huron and surrounding area. Present day. Nexus 94 reservations in blue, Site 43 in red, Canada in pink, Algonquin Provincial Park in green, United States of America in white. Dr. Scout's request was granted on the 3rd of August, 1942, and the reservations surrounding Lake Huron were collectively designated Briar Class Nexus 94 due to their low population and limited interaction with adjacent communities. 8 The Anishinaabe and several neighboring groups were thereby made exempt from standard amnesticization procedures. The federal government's Indian agents were explicitly excluded from this arrangement, having failed to demonstrate appropriate levels of discretion. Dr. Scout called an emergency conference of elders from Nexus 94 on the 6th of August. 5 Indian agents attempted to log protests with the federal government over this violation of the pass system, restricting travel both to and from the relevant reservations. They were detained and amnesticized. Comparison of SCP-5494 single quote S campaign against the Foundation with Anishinaabe oral history reveal 3 points of divergence. First, before the construction of Provisional Site 43, underwater panther attacks had occurred only infrequently. Second, no attacks against Anishinaabe had been recorded since the days of their ancestors, even while Foundation work sites and workers were under siege. Third, in every surviving tale the underwater panthers drowned their prey in the lake rather than consuming them. Anishinaabe consultants suggested 5 causal factors for these behavioral departures when dealing with Foundation personnel and other non-Indigenous peoples. The increased shipping on Lake Huron without appeal to SCP-5494 for safe passage. The industrial-scale removal of copper from the lake. The presence of outsiders in large numbers. The attempts made to capture SCP-5494. And the demonization of SCP-5494 by Christian missionaries. Consultants emphasized that SCP-5494 was a natural force to be propitiated and accepted, not confronted or contained. They speculated that SCP-5494 would resume its original behavior if all aggravating factors were removed and all future interactions were carried out by the Indigenous peoples alone, according to their own traditions. It was also suggested that the water purification project might be acceptable to SCP-5494 if it benefited the Nexus 94 reservations, instead of the other Lake Huron facilities with clean water. Dr. Scout and Ryderick mandated these measures by fiat. All Foundation shipping on Lake Huron was halted, and Lake Huron Supply Control and Purification Site 43 began providing drinking water to reservations around southern Lake Huron against strident objections from the Departments of Indian Affairs and Defense. The Foundation imported copper ore to restore the deposits in the lake bed, and sourced all future piping material from offset. Dr. Ryderick subsequently reported an inexplicable 23% increase in the efficacy of the achromatic abatement sections facilities. No cases of SCP-5494 interference have been recorded in the succeeding 8 decades. While the bed of Lake Huron continues to be monitored, and SCP-5494 sightings have been numerous, no further attacks on Foundation personnel have occurred. Addendum 5494-3, update, from the files of Dr. V. Leslie Scout, Director of Site 43. I am constantly having to explain to visiting Foundation officials that yes, there are uncontained underwater panthers in the lake, and no, we're not attempting to contain them. There has been a serious failure of understanding. Here, it's not our lake, and they're not our panthers. V. Leslie Scout, Journal. And is also unnecessary. 2. In cryptobiology, A chimera is an entity with physical characteristics derived from multiple discrete species. 3. Specimens with more reptilian, ophidian features are attested in oral histories of the region. 4. The Anishinaabe are a cultural and linguistic grouping of First Peoples groupings. Plural, Anishinaabeg or Anishinaabeg. 5. This claim could not be verified, as no sightings on